foolishly enough, I had a restaurant that I wanted to go to. That was there's a really famous Canadian kind of internet chef called Matty Matheson, and he's got like a bunch of he's like a big personality. He's got a bunch of restaurants, and I really wanted to go to one. And I was like, oh, we've got 3 days around the wedding, we'll go. And then I realized Canada is like the size of Australia, and so we couldn't go. It wasn't that easy. So anyway, we are live streaming, so that's fantastic. We're recording, we're just ready to go. Oh, no one's watching yet, don't you worry.
Okay. I'm never sure how live streams work exactly. So
we don't get heaps on the live stream. We're getting a few more now because we stream across multiple platforms and we do it at the same time every week. But we then repurpose the videos, and those videos do well. So
fantastic.
So anything that happens, and one thing that's been happening a lot lately is that my front door and my front window are right next to me, and I'll have like Amazon delivery drivers like,
yep,
can you come sign this? And I'm like, oh, so I'm gonna leave every now and then. I'm gonna leave the podcast, and I know there's a delivery coming today, so it's all editable, right?
Absolutely, we'll fix it in post.
Well, let's get into it. I'll do a quick intro and then we'll roll.
Cool.
Welcome back to Coaches to the Moon podcast, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to stop there, Meghan. Dougherty?
Dougherty.
Dougherty. I'm sorry. I'm going to pronounce that as well as I can. I hate to mispronounce names.
No worries.
I'm going to try again. Dougherty.
Perfect.
Dougherty. Welcome back to the Coaches to the Moon podcast, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very honored to be joined today by our first Canadian guest, Meghan Dougherty. She's a digital marketing strategist. She's the co-founder of One Stone Creative, which is a business helping you to unlock the power of podcasts in your business. She's also an avid collector of houseplants, just like myself. So straight out of Quebec in Canada. Meghan, welcome to the show.
Alex, thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here.
Comment ça va?
Honored to be the first Canadian.
Parlez-vous français?
Oui, un peu. Oui. Je suis pas vraiment bilingue, mais c'est pas pire.
Well, you've gone over my head there, so I'm assuming it was complimentary.
Got to show off a little when asked. It's
That's fantastic. That's really great. We studied, I'm from England, and when you're in England, the first language you learn is French. It's just over the pond there. So I spoke really good French until I was like 11, and then I moved to Australia, and Australia is a lot further from France, so it's not as necessary.
Probably not as much practice as I get like going for groceries. Yeah.
100%. That's really, really cool. What's it, just like completely off topic, what's it like living in a sort of bilingual society like Quebec?
Well, I grew up in the city I live in is on the border with Ontario. So it's in back and forth really, really easy. And we did French about half of our school in elementary. So from kindergarten up until the middle of high school, I was doing half of my education in French. And then when you get out, when you're working, I work, service jobs, food service jobs, like a lot of people do. And about half your clients are going to be in French. So you just end up practicing, and then you get French neighbors, and you have, you do your shopping in French. So you just, again, I'm not perfectly fluently bilingual, but I can hold generally a conversation, and pay taxes in French. So
what a gift.
It's fun. It's fun.
That's
and it's
great.
Nice. The funny thing is sometimes you'll mix up a word, one language to the other. So I'll remember a word or a term will be a little more perfect in French than the English equivalent would be, so that can be a little fun and a little confusing sometimes.
Oh, I'm always so jealous of people who have been raised with that bilingual, from being a kid. It's so much harder as a grown-up, right? So
it is.
Yeah, my wife her dad's German, and she is fuming at him that he didn't push her to learn fluent German when she was a kid, because now, when do you put the time aside to learn German? Anyway, let's talk about you. What do you love about houseplants?
Oh gosh. Well, it's so I live in Canada, as established. It's really dark and really colorless here for a lot of the year. So just having all of these green and sometimes flowering plants inside, it just is such a treat. It's refreshing for the eyes, I find. So I love them basically for the color and the life and the freshness they bring to the exceptionally long winters.
I love it. Yeah, I'm a big houseplant guy. I can't see any in this room. They're all on the shelf.
I've got a couple behind me.
Oh, the little one there. Yeah. And I'm getting into outdoor gardening. Do you get much outdoor gardening done given how harsh the Canadian winter is?
Actually, yes. One of my biggest hobbies is vegetable gardening. And I've got in my backyard, I've got fruit trees, I've got tomatoes, I've got beans, I do squash, pretty much everything.
Oh, that's fantastic.
I
I'm
love
trying to
it.
get into it now. I'm trying to teach my daughters about, the natural world rather than just the virtual. And I know my assistant Christian, who may have spoken to you to help book this podcast, he's got a vegetable garden as well, so he'll be very excited to hear that.
Oh, and kids love it too, and it's so much fun. Like when they can like learn how a little seed becomes a little plant, and then becomes a tomato, and they can eat it. Like it's so cool to see them learn about that process.
I can't wait. I can't wait. I think you're a couple
It's
of
gonna
years
be
ahead of me on
awesome.
that one, and I'm excited.
I
So,
don't. I only have my friends' kids to dote on, but I enjoy teaching them gardening.
yeah, friends, kids, but the cat isn't so interested, right?
No, not so much.
So I want to talk about your show, the business podcast Blueprint. So
Mhm.
I started this podcast as a bit of a networking tool and a good kind of reason to cold reach out to people I wanted to work with eventually, because no one really likes getting cold DMs or cold emails. But when you can invite them onto a show and start a relationship, I found that was a better way of providing value.
Yeah.
We also use this to make a lot of content for the social media. But why do you think a podcast is such a valuable asset for a business in 2022?
Well, I mean, you gave two really good reasons. It's great for generating content in a consistent basis. I mean, one of the big problems, one of the big difficulties of content is that you have to keep producing. You've got to keep feeding that machine of content. A podcast is a really nice way to do it. And it's efficient because, as you say, you can also be using it to network. And in the business podcast Blueprint, it's the name of our show, and it's also a framework we use to help people build podcasts. And those are two of kind of the elements of them right there. It's relationship building podcasts. So if you have a need in your business, as you do, to connect with people, to grow your professional network for whatever reason, a podcast is a really nice, elegant, and organic way to do it. And if you just need content of different kinds or for different purposes, a podcast, unless you're doing something unbelievably wrong, you're going to get content when you podcast. And some of the other things you can try to establish are, building or nurturing a relationship with an audience you already have, or people who are already kind of connected to you in some way, or establishing thought leadership and kind of brand awareness. So those are the four main categories I'd say that can be really useful for business owners thinking about podcasting.
Yeah, 100%. I love all of that. I think I'm on board with you with all of them now, and that we're further into it. And I'm seeing that it does, after a while, it starts to open doors a little bit. It can be a slog at the beginning, so you need to love it. But it does start to open doors after a while. Do you think that, I mean, I'm in the coaching space where generally in the coaching space, someone is like the face of the business.
Yeah.
And it's like, you want to talk about yourself and put yourself up. But so a podcast makes sense. But what about for more sort of company-based businesses when you're talking about like a product? Like I have a friend who runs a clothing line, and I was talking to him about a podcast. Where do you see a podcast fitting in when a product is the highlight of the business rather than a person?
What a fun question. So I mean, there are podcasts. Well, first I'll say it's not a great fit for every business or for every business need. So I always ask people or recommend that people start with, where is your business now? What do you need in the next 6 to 12 months? Can a podcast realistically help you achieve that? Now, if the answer is yes, cool, go for it. And so if you are, product-based marketing, maybe your podcast could be interviews or conversations with the people who help make it, the people who designed it, the people who use it, the people that you sell it through. There are always stories around products, so you can use a podcast to tell those stories. You can, maybe have fun with it. Do you remember there was a series of TV commercials back ages ago, the Will It Blend? From the Blend Tech, I think, was a blending.
Yes, yeah. I remember. Well, I remember a YouTube channel called Will It Blend, and so I'd imagine it's the same people. Yeah,
I bet that was it. So maybe a product, if it was if you could do something like that, kind of create some kind of gimmick or story around it, and make the product itself the star of the show, and then create content that could be really fun. That might be interesting. It could be ridiculous, but you never know until you try. Off the top of my head, those are a couple ways you might be able to do it.
I think story is great. I think story is really, really important because, I mean, if there's so many options for every product these days, right? And from everything from webcams to t-shirts, there's so many options. I think I would be probably more inclined to buy a t-shirt that had an interesting backstory. The company has interesting ethics, or they make donations to charities, or they have like a mission. And I feel like that is a really, really cool way of not generating direct revenue, but when, and the knock-on effect of someone saying, hey, cool shirt, and you saying, actually, cool story about this shirt. I was listening to a podcast with the guy who made this shirt and he did this. You should totally check out their website. And I think podcast feels like a long game to me for that reason.
Often. Very often. I like that idea of traveling. I mean, what may even be more fun with our t-shirt example, take your t-shirt, take a t-shirt, send it to a customer or a user, maybe a special edition, something limited, and then do a live call like this while they're wearing it somewhere and ask them about where they are, what they're seeing, what they're doing, what's your adventure with the shirt. Then they have to send it to somebody else. And then you have a conversation with that person. You can follow the t-shirt around the world. That would be so cool.
Yeah, what a great idea.
That show.
Like Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants.
Exactly. But like with this really, really cool limited edition t-shirt, I think that's fun. And podcasting very often is a long game. If you're doing it for relationship building, for networking, any person that you talk to, that could have a really fast return on, the investment of your time and your energy. That could turn into a profitable relationship immediately. Forgive me for sounding too mercenary. But, in other ways, those relationships, you're going to be building them over time. And the content is going to, become a library over time. And especially your skills are going to dramatically improve over time. What you can do after you've been podcasting for 3 years is going to be very different than what you can do in your first 6 months of podcasting.
100%. Absolutely. I think it's an interesting tool to both add to your business, but also to kind of, you can almost start a business off the back of it as well, because I'm looking at a couple of people I love to listen to, actually in the kind of the gardening and self-sufficiency space. I've been listening to a lot lately, and you realize that so much of their show is they'll be interviewing people who sponsor the show. They'll be sending you to go to our website and grab our ebook, and then you're on a list, and then you get their email marketing, all that kind of thing. And just as I'm just seeing it as, the more I get into it, a really, really interesting way of bringing more people into monetizing your business just through having valuable conversations every week. So
it is.
I'm sure you see a lot of that.
I would differentiate though, a podcast that exists as a business and one that you're running for a business.
Okay.
They've got different needs and you should have different priorities for them. So, if you are running your podcast, the podcast is going to be sort of the beating heart of your business and everything is going to grow off of that. You're going to want to make different decisions about, how much time you can invest in it, how much money you're going to invest in it, how commercial you have to be, how much attention you have to pay to data and download style metrics and growth. If you're running a podcast for a business, you have a lot more flexibility in how it's going to fit into the rest of your marketing activities, how many members of your team can be working on it, what you prioritize maybe instead of download. So both totally valid ways to approach podcasting, but I would say that they're different and probably shouldn't be mistaken.
It's a very good point. Probably most people we'd be talking to today, it would be for a business rather than as a business.
Yeah, and that's I'd say would be my area of expertise. I like we work with people who have whole businesses you need to run. What you can invest in a podcast is really different when you're running a whole business. Either by yourself or on a small team. It has to be efficient. It has to pay for itself reasonably quickly, and it has to not take up too much of your time.
Totally, I love that. Let's jump into that, because you've got a really interesting episode of your show called Metrics That Matter for Company Podcasts. And
metrics?
Yes, well, I love numbers and metrics in my marketing agency. I know what to look for. But in this podcast space, I'm just talking to people. I'm just making some content. If I have a good conversation, then it's been a successful episode for me. So you did a great talk on that show, which was diving into the metrics that matter. Can you give us a bit of a rundown of the main metrics that we should look for outside of just downloads?
Absolutely. And I'm going to frustrate you immediately with my response, which is it really depends on your business. And there's going to be, the different, whatever your reason is for podcasting, that's what you should track metrics for. Like whatever matters, whatever your and business goals too. I love that people are passionate about it, but I don't care because you can't measure that. So it's great, but let's put some numbers on it. So, you mentioned something interesting kind of at the top of our conversation. I don't know if we were recording yet, but you said, hey, the live streams of this podcast aren't getting super, super high downloads as we're streaming them live, but you're starting to see more traction in these other pieces of content that you're creating based on them and the other platforms that you're putting. So that's a really important metric to be tracking. What's the correlation, or what is the relationship between people who are watching live and then people who are seeing later, and where is that growth happening? That's going to be a really strong indication that you've got a strong following on whatever platform is seeing that traction and that growth. So that's a metric for you that I'd recommend taking a look at. And for other companies, it could be completely different. It could be how many guests become clients. It could be how many guests send referrals. It could be how many people are engaging with the questions that you're asking on social media, or who are sending in you questions to be answered. It could be how many people you can interview who you can then use as testimonials or case studies on your website. And how does that then affect your sales numbers in your different funnels or on your sales pages? So you can really get granular about where you're using your podcast content and what it means for your business, with a little planning and several spreadsheets.
You love spreadsheets, but you haven't mastered Twitter yet.
Yes, exactly.
I've just hired a guy to do my spreadsheets for me.
Nice.
Because I've learned to use them, and it's very satisfying when you figure out how to do a spreadsheet. Like I just learned to do formulas like last month,
Oh, nice.
I've been in online business for 7 years, right? So I've figured it out, and now I know enough to hire a guy to do it for me and get
Amazing.
that out of my hair. But I really love that you're tracking those metrics. And I think Christian, who my assistant, if you're watching this, which you should be, let's write down that we need to start tracking the live viewing figures, the views on the repurposed content, the clicks on the blogs that we make from the transcriptions, and also the guest to referrals and the guest to client. That's a great one, because I'm not sure if we've directly had someone become a client because of the podcast, but we do definitely have clients now who have been on the podcast before they were paying us. Yeah. So it starts a relationship in a way that you wouldn't have otherwise spoken to this person.
Exactly. And it's such a nice way to begin a relationship too, right? Because you're just having a nice conversation with someone. It's a pretty much pure win-win. There's no kind of ulterior motive other than, as you said, have a great conversation and then maybe see what happens after. It's a really nice way to meet people.
100%. I think I've got 75 new friends. We're on episode 78 from this show, and I think maybe 3 or 4 of them have just been me ranting into a microphone when we couldn't find a guest for the week. But for the most part, this is such a lovely array of people from Los Angeles to Canada to the UK to deep in Europe, just chatting with people you would have never otherwise met without
really great.
Zoom and without, a reason to sit down and talk together.
Exactly. I've got one client, she's wonderful, and she says, I don't have friends, I have podcast guests.
Love that. I love that. I do. I would love to be able to kind of have broader conversations on a podcast, but I know that at the level I'm at, no one really cares what I have to say outside of this little business niche. So I've not got the ego behind me to just say, I'm Joe Rogan, I can sit down and talk for 3 hours with anyone. I'd love to, but no one's going to care about me. So I'll wait till I've got 15 million downloads per episode to do that.
So I mean, also like people who listen to podcasts, we're busy. And there's a lot of shows out there to listen to. So the more, especially with your supporting a business with a podcaster, it's an integral part of your marketing. Being really niche is really good. It's serving your audience better, even if it would be fun to sit and have random conversation. Someone should host a podcast series or a network that is just people sitting down and having conversations with each other. And then all of us who have business podcasts can go and get our need for conversation out on other people's shows. And then we can keep our own focused and niched. There's an idea for the listening public. Somebody please take that and do that.
I love that. I love that concept. And it's basically, what do you think it is about a podcast that just allows for such good conversation compared to going to a bar with your friends?
Well, part of it, the acoustics are going to be a lot better. So we've all paid at least a little bit of attention to our sound. And I think part of it is you are on a little bit better behavior. when you're on a podcast, you're going to make an effort, I would hope, to listen and make sure that you're speaking as clearly as possible. And so kind of those are really good seeds for a good conversation, right? And then it's also, a lot of these conversations start around areas that people are already pretty passionate about. You don't just show up at the bar and like, okay, the conversation happens to be the ball game because the ball game is on, or politics because the world is trash fire. Your people are here talking about a topic that's planned. They've had a little time to think about it in advance, and it's something they're going to be knowledgeable and passionate about. And I think that's, like, again, really good food for conversation.
I think you're totally right. And thinking of that, the way you speak in a podcast, if you spoke like this in a day-to-day conversation, people probably think you're weird. If you had a big build up to a question with all this context in the background, I think that, I think basically, unless you're like Russell Brand, who just talks like that anyway, it's going to be a weird thing to do, to a massive backstory and then ask someone a really intense question. I've got a friend, one of my dad's friends actually. He's a real big conversationalist and he loves his wine and loves his food. And my wife and I had been to Europe on our honeymoon, and I remember we remember because he talked like an interviewer, and he would say, and he's English, he's like, Alex, on your travels, did you have any revelations when it came to the food and wine you were experiencing in the context compared to experiencing similar foods in a more relevant or a more familiar environment, such as a restaurant in your hometown? What was that like? And it's a brilliant question, but no one talks about that face to face.
I adore people like that. I think maybe like every like group of connected people has one. That reminds me of like a second cousin I have has sort of that way about him, and a lot of my family doesn't like talking to him. I love this guy. And maybe that's why we're podcasters, is because we like that kind of thing.
100%. I'm getting better at it. I used to shy away from big discussions at the dinner table. Now I'm so into it. Maybe it's just I'm more cynical these days or whatever, and I just love bitchy about things. Who knows?
Well, I mean, you've got leverage within your family. You have beautiful twin daughters.
Oh yeah.
You are the keeper of the keys. You can say whatever you want. Use this power. Enjoy it.
I'll say goodbye to cuddles for a few months. That's we should start using them as more of a bargaining tool. That's
oh yeah. They can't earn their keep yet. Like, you get them working for you.
The business advice keeps on coming. Even when you don't expect it. Let's get back to podcasting. I'll keep you on track a little bit. For people listening, maybe they're in their coaching business, mostly the demographic we work with, and they've heard you say, the 4 main reasons why they should be starting a podcast and, what metrics to focus on. And now they're sitting there thinking, all right, I'm going to start a podcast. This is overwhelming.
Yep. So
many softwares, so much equipment. Where do I begin?
First things first is, if you think I could podcast, this could be great for me, I might like it, go be a guest on someone else's show first. Do that 3, 5, 10 times. Make sure you actually like having a conversation in that format. And then the next thing you'll want to do is figure out, do you want to really commit to podcasting right away? Because, an ongoing show week to week or even every other week is a big commitment. So maybe you don't want to start out that intense. And if you just want to test the waters, plan a season, 12 episodes, beginning and end. You can test it out, see if you like it, have the conversations. If you finish the season and you thought that was great, but I don't want to do it anymore, perfect. You didn't fail. You finished a project that you intended to start. If you do like it, there's nothing to prevent you from doing another season or going weekly. When it comes to tech and software, there's so many options and you can spend as much money as you want on your setup. So, follow your heart. If you're a gearhead, like, revel in the possibilities. But, getting a decent quality standalone mic, if you can avoid using a headset, mine is only for my ears, not for my mic, which is in front of me. Get a standing mic. That's going to be a really big difference. Make sure you're recording in the best room possible for the sound. All of the hosts, the places where you put your podcast on the internet that then distributes it, they're more or less all created equal. So, don't worry too much about the tech. Worry about getting a good mic and then using that mic well. And then just get your terrible first couple of episodes out of the way, because they're going to be bad and you just need to get through them, and that's going to be fine. But then you'll just, as you as you get a little more competence and a little more confidence, you'll start to have a lot more fun with it.
I like that. Really, really good tangible advice there. What do you think about how much preparation should people put into what they're going to say in a podcast? Do you think that having a few questions put aside, I've got a few questions here next to me, a couple of notes. Do you think that there's a minimum and a maximum amount of kind of scripting you should be doing?
That's going to be completely to your own taste and your own style. So some people thrive on off the cuff, and they're really good coming up with things on the fly and really like, oh, that was a great point, we need to follow that up. Other people need more prep. I'm a prepper, so I plan out kind of in advance. I even share with my guests, hey, these are the things I want to talk about if you would like to consider them in advance as well. But it's personal choice. Not everyone does that. Not everyone has to. So I experiment with different methods. Try, I read once for interviews, Barbara Walters, of Interviewing Fame, for a 20 or 30-minute interview, she'll provide 60 questions. She'll write 60 questions and think about 60 questions, and she won't use them all. She'll follow the conversation as it goes naturally, but she put that much thought and time into preparing. And obviously she's an amazing interviewer. So that's one way to do about it. Just because you plan something doesn't mean you have to use it, but it would be nice to have if you do. So experiment with different methods and see what feels good and what is a good workflow for you.
That sounds about right. I think it depends on who I'm speaking with and how confident I am with their topic and how much preparation I put in. With you, I've got a couple of notes. With some people, when it's in the more kind of spirituality, intangible space, which is completely not my area, I need to know a little bit more going in, because you want to be able to contribute to the conversation, right? Rather than just give short, question and answer style interviews.
And that's a really important point that you're bringing up, I think, because the style of the show that you have too really has an impact on how you're going to be able to use the podcast and how much it's going to benefit you. So if you are trying to kind of establish yourself and your business and your brand as a leader in your space, you can't just be a Q&A machine, because that all you're doing is shining the light on other people. There are really appropriate times to just spend all of your time shining the light on other people. Like if you've got an audience of people who are really hungry for your content, like say my audience desperately wanted to know about elephant training. I don't know anything about elephant training. So I'm going to find an elephant trainer and I'm going to get all the information I can from them about elephant training to the audience. That doesn't need to be a conversation between equals. That's me helping an expert demonstrate their expertise. But a conversation that is more in line with my expertise, how I want to be known, I do want that to be more of a back and forth. I do want to be sharing equally and conversing with an equal rather than conveying an expert to my audience.
Yeah, that's a really good point as well. I find that some of the content that does the best that we make from this one, it is more of a back and forth kind of minute and a half talking rather than just a single answer from someone. I love getting like a mic drop moment from a guest, who just says the most amazing thing and then lands the plane, and then the point is finished and it's like, whoa, that's great advice. But I think the back and forth conversations are huge. I also think that I interview the way I like to be interviewed, which is I hate it when I get on a podcast and the person goes, Alex, tell us about yourself. Like, okay, here's my pre-prepared little spiel again. I like to, when people know a couple of things about me, or a couple of things about what I like, and so I hope it's appreciated sometimes. Like to dig in, and Christian helps. Megan likes houseplants, that sort of thing. I think that puts me at ease when someone talks to me about my life outside work a little bit, and I try to do that. Just treat others as you like to be treated. That kind of vibe is that's the way I run my show.
Yeah, I think that's really nice. I mean, you've made this a lovely experience as a guest. I knew what was going to happen. I knew how it was. I knew it was going to be recorded and it would be video. I knew when it was going to happen. It's like being a guest and being a host. These are ideas that they used to be so important. There were real rules and expectations and importance to being a good host and a good guest. And I hope podcasting is bringing that back a little bit. Being a generous and gracious host, and then being a hospitable guest. I think these are important concepts.
Yeah, don't turn up empty-handed. It's what I've always learned, so I try not to. You've got a concept of turning your podcast into a book.
Yes.
I love this concept, and I've actually played around with this idea a little bit. if it's okay, I'd love to throw
Mhm.
my concept your way and see if you have any feedback about how I can make it better.
Please, please.
So our podcast is we're 78 episodes in, and I was told get to 100 episodes as fast as possible by a guy with a pretty good podcast. So we're powering towards it. Sometimes we do 2 episodes a week, sometimes 1, and we'll be there by the end of the year. 100 podcasts.
Oh, fantastic.
I've read this book, which I have next to me, actually, luckily enough, which is called 100 Deadly Skills. All right. And this is
Okay.
by an ex-Navy SEAL who basically what he did was when he retired from the army, he went out and he interviewed people all around the country in different skills and in different areas of emergency preparedness and self-defense and all these things. And he took all those skills, got them kind of illustrated, and then put them into a book, 100 Deadly Skills. None of that's written by him. It's just leveraged the knowledge of other amazing people, put it all together. Now, I was thinking we could do a version of 100 Deadly Skills with 101 of the best tips from the Coaches to the Moon podcast in different fields: marketing, sales, coaching, delivery, personal development. And that content already exists. I wouldn't have to write a book. I could just have to deliver it and help highlight the amazing knowledge of other people. What do you think about that as a concept?
I think it's a pretty good concept. I like that kind of repurposing and that kind of thinking in advance of how you want to repurpose content that you have yet to make. That's going to really kind of set you up to do it the best. A couple of things that may or may not make it easier. Like, I think the concept is solid. The concept will work. You will do this and you will have a book. Getting buy-in from all of your guests would be super helpful. Letting them know, hey, I'm part of this is going to be collaboration for a big compendium book with your best tip. Of course, we'll credit you. Then you might have 100 promotional partners as well as 100 sources of information, right? Not to mention permission to use people's words thusly, which is important to get as well. And organization about what are some of the things you want to have covered. So if you've got, like, within your own coaching, your own work, if you've got frameworks that you teach or a system that you use, organizing the tips that you have into your own system is going to help you enhance your own credibility and your own branding as well. So I might think about adding a little more structure. And of course, it's going to take a little more time, which is a trade-off that you may or may not want to make. But I think it can be a really good way to bring all of these voices under your umbrella. And anytime you're going to be creating your own large-scale concept like that, I'd make sure it's under your umbrella.
Got it. I understand. So the way our business helps coaches to generate more leads and conversations and establish their brand, how do these tips fit into that delivery?
Exactly. So maybe you've got your niching tips, and then you can write a nice introduction and then maybe provide some action tips on the niching. And then maybe you've got the selling section, you have the selling tips, and then you can have your own works. Like, I think you can really use it to highlight the way you teach and the way you work, which is going to have the double benefit of demonstrating just how much you know what you're talking about, and how all of these other people are indirectly supporting and agreeing with you in what you're saying by having contributed to the book.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, what a cool idea. What a cool idea. Yeah, that's saying that if everyone buys in and then you promote them, you then have 100 extra promotional partners for the book. Goodness gracious, how wonderful is that? And
wonderful.
Yeah, I love that.
And most people are going to be pretty open to that too. It's just like, oh, hey, after your interview, I'm going to take the coolest thing you said, put you in a book and credit it. Can I tell you when it's ready? Yes. I would be delighted if you did that.
I love that. I love that. Well, you know what you can do with, the internet these days? This book has got QR codes in it for most of the tips. So when you see a tip, you can scan the QR code and it takes you to a video of how to do that skill. We already have the videos ready, Megan.
I love that. I think that's a great idea.
And then they get to there, and then it's got the links to the guests, and they can promote themselves. I'm excited about it. And when I saw podcast the book on your site, what a fantastic idea. How else can other people do that? What are some other ways of turning your podcast into a book?
Oh, let's see. Well, I mean, you came up, like, that's a really good one, is having a segment or a repeated idea or kind of a similar thing that you do in every episode that, then anything that is going to be similar but different, I guess we can call it, from episode to episode, is really a good candidate for that kind of repurposing. Or you can go way bigger. And this is something that I'm working on right now with our podcast. I just outlined the book I want to write, and I broke it into sections, and I broke those sections into smaller sections, and those are my solo episodes for the next year. And so by the end of the year, I'll have drafted the entire book. Congratulations, bingo bango, it's done.
Right. So your episodes become chapters for the book.
Yeah, or at least the roots of chapters are enough, like really good, strong points that, it's the hard work is going to be done once the end, because we're doing it. It's already broken up. It's already outlined. It's already planned. There will be more work to do, of course, but kind of the bones of it are going to be together. So that's another way to do it. And then there's kind of on the flip side, let's say you've been podcasting for 100, 150 episodes, and you're like, oh crap, I wasn't thinking about how I was going to turn this into a book. It's not too late, especially if you have been organized, you know what your topics were, you know who your guests were. You can go back through your content and sort things, all my, what are the topics I've talked about? You can organize and then kind of parse down, see what you can use, and you can derive an outline from a bunch of content that you already have. A big content library can be a really intimidating project, but it's always a good thing to have a nice big archive of content. And on the kind of final side is, if you've got an idea for a book, do exactly that or a book that you've already written, you can podcast from that too. Have I said everything I want to say about this topic? Who are other experts who have other things to say about it? And you can really make it go both ways and just have these wonderful content flywheels they're fueling your business.
Megan, you are a fountain of good ideas. My goodness. Content library. Christian, write it down, bro. He'll love that.
Here's an extra tip for you then.
Please.
Something that we do for every client that we work with, and I cannot recommend strongly enough, is a really, really robust episode guide. And you can do it in a spreadsheet, you can do it in a database, whatever you like, but it should have title, guest name, guest social handles, URLs to everywhere that you've posted it online, and keywords. Super important. It should have keywords. What is the topic of this? And what are like the great ideas or the great quotations that came from this, and have those all in one place. Then when it comes time, if you want to go back and look at your 100 episodes, it's going to be so much easier to figure out, okay, here's all the time I talked about widgets, and here's all the time I talked about houseplants. It's all going to be there for you. And it takes a little work to get it going. But if you have a Christian, it can become much easier.
Absolutely. Well, if we were to do every episode that I've got off in tangents about gardening and houseplants, then we're in trouble. That's a whole book on itself. Everything.
Maybe Alex, that's like your supercut. It's your for early bird buyers only is my permaculture supercut.
Blooper reel. Terrible things to know about gardening. Highlighting Alex's lack of knowledge about how to keep plants alive. No, that's really, really cool advice. I think after doing a lot of podcasts and getting a lot of advice from a lot of people, these are tangible tips we can take away and put into action super quickly, Megan. So thank you so much for that. And just to wrap it up, we're going to grab all your links and everything, put them in all the videos from this show, and we want to send people to your podcast. We want to send people to your podcast, the book. Is there anything in particular you'd like to tell us about, so we can send them to that? That's going to give our coaches, our startup entrepreneurs, great advice that they can learn more about your business and how to build a great podcast.
Yeah, I've got 3 things, actually, if I'm allowed to say 3. One is, if you're listening and you think, should I have a podcast? We have a workbook called Will a Podcast Work for Your Business? And you can download that. It'll take you through a lot of what I've spoken about and just help you decide, should I do this or not? And then if you decide yes, we've got an email series, free training, all of our good stuff to optimize, automate, and grow a podcast for your business. If all of that sounds good, this is something that is very new. It's not even totally publicly announced yet. So this might be one of the first times. We're running an event in November. It's going to be a conference for podcasting for business over 3 days, workshop speakers, networking, the whole shebang. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Oh, amazing. Is that going to be virtual as well, or?
It is going to be 100% virtual because we all have day jobs.
Yeah. Save on that rent as well,
Exactly. Yeah. So it's going to be I think a lot of fun, and it's as far as I know, and I could be wrong about this, but I think it is the only one that is specifically geared towards people who are podcasting in support of their businesses rather than for the love of the game.
Oh, wow. Well, when you get more information about that one, please email us, and
Absolutely.
We'd love to know more about it, because that sounds like a lot of fun.
I'm hoping it will be.
Meghan, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been absolutely delightful, and it was very worth staying up past my bedtime for.
Goodness me. Meghan has stayed up till 9:45 for this one. I'm expecting you to have a cup of warm milky tea and off to bed in the next 10 minutes, young lady.
Exactly the plan.
We are grown-ups now, and we don't stay up past 10.
No, we don't.
No need. Well, everyone who's watching on the live stream, or indeed listening or watching later on, thank you so much for being here. I'll be back next week with another episode of Coaches to the Moon. Meghan, thank you so much one more time.
Thank you for having me. This was lovely.
And to everyone else, we'll see you next week on Coaches to the Moon. Thanks for listening. Much love. And